Good morning, everyone. It's Anifa Menon from hearthealthbrainhealth.com, encouraging healthy grieving and mindful actions. Today, I'd like to talk about thinking, and some of you might know that my first degree is in neuropsych, and so I have worked with the brain a fair amount, and now, of course, my website and my work is Heart Health Brain Health. So this continues in terms of my interest in the brain and our thinking. And today I thought I'd try to share a deeper concept with you, though I thought I would label this video Thoughtless Action. And I thought that this is a good way for us to start understanding this idea. So the first quotation that I came across is by Jeff Bezos. And this quotation says, "The human brain is an incredible pattern-making machine." The human brain is an incredible pattern-making machine. Now, we know this, right? So what happens? The human brain is almost like a little computer, right? So we've got our life experiences that create a pattern in our minds and create memories. And of course, remember that experiences are always limited. So my experience is always limited. It's limited to my perception of my happenings in that experience, and that's always limited because what I perceive is slightly different than what someone else would perceive, and so my experience is limited. Now my experience leads to my knowledge, and my knowledge then leads to my thinking. So remember that my thinking today is based on the knowledge that I gained from my experience, which could be from reading, through writing, through other people's writings. It could be from lectures, it could be from education, and it could be through an actual experience that I've had personally or professionally, and that leads to my knowledge. Now I've had the experience, and that's my knowledge. That knowledge contributes to my actions today, and the thinking today leads to my actions today too, right? Now this is very interesting when we think about the limitations of that experience or learning of any sort really is always limited, right? And with limitation, we get conflict. And then we would think, how would we get conflict with that? Because my experience led to my thought, which leads to my actions, and the thinking that led to the actions that are based on my thoughts. If we think about that, and maybe I should stop saying think because there's a lot of thinking here. If we are aware of our experiences leading to our thinking, and then that thinking being a little bit different from another person's thinking, that leads to conflict. And this is the thing that we can see this happens whether in personal relationships or in professional lives. But there's a place for thinking, right? There is a place where in terms of technology and advancement that way, we need to utilize the knowledge that we gained. It's very factual based, and it's very much about, okay, this is what we know right now. And even that can change, as we know. Today's facts will be tomorrow's history, right? So it's not necessarily the thought in the now. But remember that again, if my past is working through my present to create my future, that's how we're all living. And did you know that this actually leads to the breaking down of brain cells? So if we think about how memory concerns come up over time, you'll be surprised to learn that our patterned thinking, so what I thought yesterday feeding what I think today, which feeds what I think tomorrow, it actually does not allow our brains to expand and grow. And unless we think a little differently than yesterday or today, we don't create something new, right? So in this moment, to create something new means letting go of what we thought we knew yesterday. And this is not an easy place for a majority of people to be, but I thought I would also share a few things that I wrote down here. First of all, remembering that conflict, right? So whenever there's a thought, there is division with this conflict because again, thought is limited. And because my thought is limited and your thought is limited, both of our thoughts meeting each other without necessarily a desire to understand each other brings about conflict. So this conflict then further feeds my thought. And you know that some people, and you might have met people like this, or you might be a person like this, really push, no, I know this. And the person does from their limited experience, right? So then I came across this quotation by Pliny the Elder, and it says, "The brain is the citadel of the senses. This guides the principle of thought." And this is again remembering that we have these senses coming from our brain, and I can include the mind's thinking as part of the senses, right? I can come to my senses because of something I learned yesterday, right? But at the same time, we're also creating this fresh space for new thought too. And many people do not, because whatever we think we know, we follow this pattern, and this becomes our trained mind doing the same thing it's always known. And as we do the same thing we've always known, the neurological connections in terms of the things that we know or we think we know become stronger. We become a little bit more fixed. We create more conflict. And when we want to be flexible in our thinking, when we're open to being flexible, we see the endless possibilities of the infinite. Now, if we can think of this, again, remember thought being limited, and that inevitably brings about conflict because, again, my thought will be different than someone else's thought. Eventually, there could be lots of people that think just like me, and then there will be someone who's a little different, and that brings about conflict. And if one can see this as a fact, like an actual fact, like we really do this regularly, or we can think of it as just an idea, right? It changes everything. If we see it as a fact, we do something about it. We act differently. If we see it as just an idea, well, that's kind of interesting for thinking about, right? We can waste time thinking about it, but not ever doing anything about it. And this is what has happened in history throughout time, where people have thought in these usual patterns, and then my pattern is different than your pattern. That creates conflict. So not only when we are understanding that this is a fact, do we need to understand, but we also have to do an action with this. This action can come from a space. Can it come from a space that's different than from a space of thought? Because remember, thought is based on what I've known or learned or acquired in my knowledge, which is limited. Now, so can we think about things beyond thought? And this is, of course, some of the work that I work with in terms of energy medicine, and certainly in terms of brain retraining, right? So this idea of, okay, what does meditation help us do? It gets us into a space of thoughtlessness, right? Now, this thoughtlessness can bring up an action that's based on something that's more clear, something that comes from a clarity that's beyond thinking. And people talk about this, that, oh, I'm trying to meditate to have clarity, or I want to have clarity in the next steps I take. And that doesn't come from the same space as the thought that leads to our actions in our day-to-day experiences. Like, I have to have my learned, trained thought in order to drive a car, right? I need to have that learned, trained thought to do my profession according to the things that I've been taught, and the things that are proper professionally, that are legally acceptable, and all of those things. But thinking outside of that space, which has always been the space for creation of new ideas and new inspiration, takes a space that's beyond thought. And so generally, I wanted to make sure that we all know that we're acting mechanically. So we are having these trained patterns of thoughts, and we act mechanically. Now, what else acts mechanically? Not only the computer of our brains, but computers in general, right? And do we see how much faster mechanical computers can act than from our human brain? When we compare this way, we understand that we are limited, and we might notice that, wow, information can be gathered so much faster on an actual physical computer. And so technology is moving ahead very, very fast. What we are losing is that sense that's beyond thought, that gives us this creation of, I'm going to say, the most beautiful experiences in our lives. And you think, how can you have action beyond thought or without thought? And the simplest example would be love. So, if love is based on thought, it could be because someone has done something. So it's a reciprocation. It could be that someone is understanding their own desire, their own pleasure, their own ambition, their own, what else? Their own aggression, their own control, their own violence, their own awareness of why I want to be in any relationship, right? Now, love doesn't have any of that, right? Love is just love for love. Love is not with some ulterior motive. Love just is, right? So these are the higher aspects that we as humans have a capability and an ability to actually remember. And I believe that because so many people have been really mechanically trained, and it certainly works in terms of our day-to-day living experience, as I mentioned, but it doesn't work in terms of our spiritual evolution, and it doesn't work in terms of true creativity or true love. And you know, I love love. So one more quotation that I came across was by Steve Jobs. And this says, whatever you do, you must never let the voice in your head control the brain in your heart. Whatever you do, you must never let the voice in your head control the brain in your heart. And this is so meaningful, of course, to me. We're talking about brain and heart here. And it's a very different energy in both these spaces. And again, there's a benefit and usefulness to each one, but really important for us to see which one are we working from. Now I come back to that whole idea of if we continue our mechanical process of using the brain, we will notice that parts of the brain will not expand and grow. And that's where that brain cell degeneration happens. And you know that there are lots of people going through this. So whether we look at conditions like depression, anxiety, or we look at Alzheimer's disease, all of these are stemming from a similar pattern that we're training our brains to work from. So today I'd love for you to sit for 5 minutes and see, are you able to think outside of the box of your trained mental patterns? And if you're not, you know that I'm here and I'm happy to help you move beyond that space. And I wanted to finish with one more quotation by Jiddu Krishnamurti, who talks a lot about this. And he says, freedom from the known is death, and then you are living. Freedom from the known is death, and then you are living. And I so agree with this, because if we are truly trying to benefit our minds, our lives, our experiences, our relationships, we want to move away from conflict and move towards love, is what I would say would be the commonality for all of it. At the same time, you might think, well, how is love going to get me anywhere? It does. It really does. Now, this is one of those things that unless you try it and practice it and realize it, you won't know the experience. And I would love for you to have that experience. Today, again, see how long you can spend to just realize whether you're thinking outside of the box or thinking within trained mechanical patterns. I wish you a fabulous day ahead, and I hope you remember, transform your mind and transform your life. Have a great day, everyone.